Welcome to Hinckley Reservation, primarily known for its annual Return of the Buzzards, a well-known local celebration dating back to 1957 that focuses on the return of spring to Ohio, more or less. It's a pretty big deal around here, but today it's rather irrelevant, because today we are going to look at Hinckley Reservation from a slightly different perspective, focusing in on its geological charm. We will look briefly at the top of some ledges and talk about glaciers and their role in the formation of this area. Then we will get a close look at Whipp's ledges themselves while discussing the origin of the rocks that compose them. Let's learn a little about Hinckley Reservation itself. This reservation became a part of Cleveland Metro Parks in 1920 when John F. Johnson donated 230 acres of land to the Metro Parks. The reservation today contains 2,803 acres, all located in Hinckley Township in the northeast corner of Medina County. Within its boundaries you can find about 80 miles of marked trails, 9 different picnic areas, the 90-acre Hinckley Lake, which is the largest inland lake in Cleveland Metro Parks, the slightly smaller Judges and Ledge Lakes, a pool, a spillway, a boathouse and store. There's definitely something for everyone here. But our focus today is geology, so let's get a closer look at Whipp's ledges from the very top and talk a little about the glacial history of the area. It is known that in recent geological history, which is the past 1.6 million years or so, Ohio has had 3/4 of its surface covered by vast sheets of ice, sometimes as much as 1 mile thick. This period of time is commonly known as the Ice Age, or more technically known as the Pleistocene Epoch. The glaciers that covered Ohio were actually formed in what is now central Canada and were transported under their own weight as far south as Kentucky. Many of the larger rocks you see in this area were actually transported by glacial drift. This drift left behind compact, clayey till containing rounded boulders composed of granite, gneiss, and other rocks that had their origins in Canada. Invasive rocks, if you will. There were 3 different glaciations that covered Ohio, but the Wisconsinan, arriving 14 to 24,000 years ago, had the greatest impact on this area. I'd like to point out that the highest point of the ledges, about 350 feet off the ground, sits on top of a glacial drift. So we've talked about glaciers that dated back thousands of years, but to look at the rocks that compose this area we need to go back even further, about 400 million years ago. At that time, this section of northeast Ohio was covered by an ancient sea, making big-toothed fish and sharks the major inhabitants of the land. While these fish were swimming above, silt, mud, and other sediments washed into these salty waters and settled on the sea floor. Over time, the weight of the stacked layers of sediment crushed and squeezed together to form a dark gray rock called shale. The shale in this area is known as Meadville Shale and is about 200 feet deep and concealed by glacial drift. On top of this shale, billions of tiny grains of sand were deposited and eventually cemented together, which formed a sedimentary rock called sandstone. The youngest layer of rock in this area, formed 250 million years ago, is what you are looking at right here, a conglomerate, called Sharon conglomerate actually. This rock is composed of porous, coarse to medium-grained sandstone with varying quantities of white quartz pebbles. The thickness is about 50 feet. Some of the most prominent and striking features of the Sharon conglomerate are sedimentary structures that include abundant crossbedding and honeycomb weathering, which we are going to look at now. In geology, the sedimentary structures known as crossbedding refer to horizontal units that are internally composed of inclined layers. This is a case in geology in which the original depositional layering is tilted, and the tilting is not a result of post-depositional deformation. Crossbeds or sets are the groups of inclined layers, and the inclined layers are known as cross strata. Crossbedding forms during deposition on the inclined surfaces of bedforms such as ripples and dunes, and indicates that the depositional environment contained a flowing medium, typically water or wind. Crossbedding is widespread in many environments. Honeycomb weathering is a form of salt weathering common on coastal and semi-arid granites, sandstones, and limestones. Honeycomb weathering occurs throughout the world from the polar regions to the equator. It produces pits in the weathered material, resembling a honeycomb structure. There are two distinct types of coastal honeycomb weathering, intertidal and supratidal. Part of the reason honeycomb weathering is so common on this type of rock presents another interesting fact about it. Sharon conglomerate is actually an important source of water, which is proven by the numerous springs that emerge at the base of the ledges. Because it sits on top of impervious Meadville shale, any water which descends into these porous rocks is forced to leak out at the contact point of the two geological formations, in the form of springs. So that is the geological history of Whipp's Ledges and Hinckley Reservation in a nutshell. As you can see, there's a lot more going on in this area geologically than what may commonly be known. Despite what everyone may think about the landscape of Ohio, glaciers and sediment actually give the state a lot of character and interesting features. I hope you enjoyed learning about some of that today.